Okay, so all along this presentation, we have tried to maintain some level of entertainment, right? We don't want to be that boring to people sitting there and just reading slides. That's not what we want to do. What we want to do is just also to provide you with some insight, and for that we have a Q&A here that's gonna kick off a few of our points. And the first one is certainly just pop up, so feel free to answer right now. Um, but when we're talking about identity, digital identity, there is first, and I'm the pessimistic guy today. I'm the one starting with the bad news, right? One of the problem with digital identity is that uh, there is a lot of data breaches. These data breaches happen over the last uh, few years since the modern history, right? And I'm not, as mentioned in the questions here, I'm not mentioning only Jeff Bezos' SMS leaked here. I'm talking about really large, massive amount of data that have been breached over the years. So we're talking about Yahoo, Equifax, Facebook, Starwood. All these data breaches have built actually a massive amount of name, address, password, and all these things are now on the darknet, and they are threatening your digital identity. And when you can see these numbers, we are talking about billions of records out there on the darknet. And just for the correct answer, and for the people having answer here, it's Yahoo is still the winner, massive winner, with 3 billion data stolen in 2013. So yes, it's still way ahead the curve. Even Equifax and Facebook are not breaking that record. So we go. These threats mean also that it creates some opportunity, and this is where Frank, you have some good news there.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, we're in a world where there are many what would I call them, digital orphans, right? People who yet have not access to all these services you used to taking, like buying online, doing banking online, booking your trips on, and all that stuff. And one of the reasons they don't have access to this is because there is no trust, right? And the reason there is no trust is because they don't have a digital ID yet. So if you look at this map, and this very interesting study has been conducted, there's actually billions in terms of GDP that can be gained by securing digital identity and enabling all these people to suddenly join the fray and become digital consumers, consume more, consume in an easier manner for them. Interesting enough, these numbers are actually pre-COVID. So in the Northern Hemisphere, we're talking about 3% on average per country. A bit more in the States and Europe makes sense. People are more spread out. But in the Southern Hemisphere, it's huge, right? Alone Brazil, 13% of people would be able to access all that digital economy if they had basically a secure digital identity. And we may also imagine that since COVID, a whole new group of people, like the seniors in our society who were a bit more reluctant to go online, suddenly have also become far more interested in terms of like joining the fray. I think there we have a question to you too on this topic, basically. And that's basically, how many people do you actually think are unbanked right now? Right? It's a huge amount of people who are slowed down in the economic life because the only way to conduct transactions, it's cash, it's barter, and it's actually only with people that are nearby, whereas actually they often live in countries where there are huge distances, right, to find other things than what is just around you, so that they're punished in a double manner, basically. If they would be able to conduct transactions, let's say 100 kilometers away or even far further through a digital means, that would hugely help them, right? And we're talking of a huge amount of people. And one of the key tools to enable these people in terms of becoming digital, especially look at it in the Southern Hemisphere, where actually no phone line exists at all. They're not going to be built because it's much cheaper to install a mast with a GSM signal on it. Well, that's the tool. And that is one of the reasons we're going to talk about mobiles being a key tool to enabling people. So here we go. Yes, interesting answer. And actually,
yes,
the public is right?
Yeah. 1.7 billion. It's correct.
Yeah.
I hope you didn't Google that, guys. But
Yeah.
yes, this is very astonishing numbers, and it means that definitely acquiring a digital identity is really important and key for people. I've been told here, I receive a message that people are seeing my not the full screen. So I'm gonna try to change that if you don't mind quickly. Excuse me for that technical interruption, but it seems that we have to provide you with an additional. Is it better?
Yeah, now it's perfect.
Thank you.
We see you loud and clear.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. So, always.
So to frame this, digital ID.
A webinar.
What is it actually? Let's give it a few basic elements, right? There's three components. Obviously, the one that's most evident to us is it covers individuals, right? But it goes actually further than this, because in order to conduct business, a lot of business is conducted by institutions, and they're represented by senior managing officers. So these are the people in the middle. So they have an ID too. They must evidence their ID too. And in order to be compliant in today's world, actually somebody needs to know who's in control, who are the ultimate beneficial owners, so the UBOs. So digital identity is not about the individual only, it's also the people running institutions or corporations and the people controlling corporations, on which you need transparency. If you look at the process of basically creating and validating a digital identity, it is more or less always the same. You initiate a contact. That can be as easy as sending a link or an SMS link to somebody who's going to start to onboard themselves. Then you could need to collect a bit of information, like we're going to go into this ID, something that evidences who you are. Somebody will contact the due diligence. There's increasingly, there are systems to do this more or less automatically or supported by AI. Sometimes the due diligence has to be extended if there is some unusual phenomenon. And then if you look, for example, under AML 4 and 5, there's a lot of things you can, so anti-money laundering directive, that things you can delegate, but you must still have an approval. So if we now look at where people go, why is this so important? Well, if you look at people who bank, and that's a graph here on the left, you can clearly say that people who used mixed online, offline banking went in 5 years from 65% to 88%. It's a huge increase. But what is more important is on some activities, actually, and that's on the right graph, if you look at this, for some activities, it's not very high, but others, like look at your balance on your bank account and do easy transactions, actually nearing 100%. So people increasingly want to bank online, especially for simple transactions. This tendency is very, very clear.
And this is where we introduced banking apps and what for mobile user was the weekly usage of banking apps, according to you. Another surprising answer, trust me.
Exactly, because the other thing, and that's why we ask for mobile apps, is that, online banking is computers, online banking is tablets, online banking is mobiles, and the mobile is playing an increasing role, obviously, in this. But the tendency, and again, these numbers are pre-COVID, we can tell you that in recent weeks, we have seen these numbers hugely shoot up in terms of going online. Ah, dearly.
Yeah, I think, no, the correct answer is 35%.
Mm-hmm.
Around the 50-ish percent going to be the social networks, but 35% is for the mobile app banking apps.
This is worldwide, meaning there's a lot of potential gaps to fill here, right? So we can get to 50% really fast.
So what we have seen, because of that usage through mobile, we have seen that actually, for some people, their smartphone is the only kind of ID they have today, right? And this is with astonishing numbers here. I'm not going to go through all the numbers. I don't want to flood you with numbers, but more about the concept itself is people are definitely engaged on the smartphone. And for example, for a company like TeleSign that has been built on two-factor authentication, mobile, we've decided that the phone number should be at the center of everything, because it becomes for sure your primary ID. And we want to use your phone number as an ID. And in general, in KYC, in account events, the phone number is really helping to onboard, recover, and engage a user. So the phone number can be used at any time of the customer life cycle, right? And you can see that with the lead generation, with the registration, to manage your account and to support and engage. So this is becoming really important that we use some part of that mobile experience, so the phone number, to help you in the digital onboarding. And this is where we have a heavy focus. But beside that, there is a lot of things that are gravitating around the phone number. And this is where you want to have the full experience on mobile that is perfectly answering this trend of using the smartphone more and more. And also, not everybody is with a smartphone. There is a lot of feature phones still out there, but you want to make sure that you are able to bank the unbanked. And it means that you need to find solution that goes not only from extremely complex KYC, but also for more basic things that answer also the needs of feature phone.
And to seal this off, Guillaume, if you allow me, there's even initiatives over here in Europe. So one is the TIPS by the European Central Bank, part of Target. It means instant payment settlement. And the idea there is at a certain stage to link actually your IBAN bank number to your mobile number, so you can do payments mobile to mobile immediately. So there are key initiatives here running around on that.
Yeah, we were discussing yesterday, Frank and I, and we know there was already initiative like that in the US, but they're coming from applications that are more individual. It's not like a concerted thing here by the banks in the US. So it's really good to see that government or more financial institutions are taking that at the next level. And this is really something we look forward to. We want now maybe to have our hands dirty, right, and go to some of the use cases that we have observed, and I think that's the right moment now to pivot to that part. And one of the use case because it's really nice to see all this theory about digital identity, talking about phone number, facial recognition, biometrics, and so on. But what does it mean, on the field, right, with the customers? And for the end user, what does it mean? So we have been implementing some of these digital KYC, directly providing information to some payment apps in the UK, where actually we are working with carriers, mobile carriers in UK, to obtain some information on the customers they have in their CRM, in order to match that with what the application has during their KYC. And we have seen that this type of onboarding is really frictionless for the end user, and it helps to drive additional level of security for the application, and it helps also to accelerate the checkout. Sorry, still 5 a.m. here. Sorry if the brain freeze from time to time. So the checkout has been accelerated thanks to that. And we have seen really a tremendous success thanks to that, working with digital information coming from the telco world, so around the phone number, but also combined with some piece of identification like address and names. And all together we can match that, and we can make sure that there is a frictionless experience for the end user. Of course, this is in the frame and the context of a very a security use case, right? Making sure also from a GDPR perspective, it's fully compliant. And this is where you want to make sure that you have this level of keeping that balance between security and friction for the end compliance, for the end user, for the application, and also for the carriers at the other hand. Frank?
Yeah, we have another use case. So we worked with a tokenized crowd vesting company. So their endeavor is to tokenize investments into SMEs. Clearly, they want to do this because on one hand, these are investments that are usually not directly accessible to smaller investors or retail investors. On the other hand, SMEs are desperately looking for funds and different funds. But the condition for this, and it creates liquidity that way, right? If it's tokenized, you're not stuck with an SME. If you don't like it, you move from one to the other, and so on. That and a conditionality for this to work and to get retail investors and maybe other investors. By the way, it's mixed investors using that platform on board. It must be really very easy and safe to use. They clearly are online only, so the game works like 100% online onboarding. There's no other option to do this, and 100% online investing, right? So that's a challenge we were confronted with. So we set up a system that enabled people to onboard themselves online using any type of device, whether it was a PC or a notebook or a tablet or a mobile phone, which, as you alluded to, is increasingly being used. And importantly, once they identify themselves using some kind of piece, they would also provide their mobile number. And the great thing is actually, once identified, they can start playing on the platform, but importantly, basically, and that's activated within minutes, and we'll come to that later, why that is important, because people want to act fast. The other thing, once you invested your money and you want to shift your investment, let's say from one company to the other, right, shift your tokens in a certain sense, take advantage of the secondary market, well, what is important to have a safe access, that the system really knows you are you, right? And that your funds are not being given to somebody else, somebody's messing with your portfolio. And here, one of the aspects that's really helpful is something like two-factor authentication, right? Maybe Guillaume, you can tell us how that works in your few streaks, yeah.
Yes, the two-factor authentication is really about something something you have. And in that case, something going to be a password that we're going to send you over a PIN code or via SMS or via voice, and then on your smartphone, right? Or on your feature phone, on your phone. And so this is where it's very important to make sure that there was this additional check around the two-factor authentication to make sure and we're going to talk a bit later, so I'm not going to concentrate our attention, but you want to make sure that everything around that phone number is being is verified, right? That phone number is really in between the hands on your customers. So it's really important from that two-factor authentication, which is really still the most used way of authenticating user, because it's homogeneous, right? It works across all phones in the world, and that's feature phone, smartphone, GSMA, CDMA. We can talk hours around it, but this is homogeneous and it works globally. So this is really important to make sure that you enable two-factor authentication, by the way, on most of your account. So we'll talk about later on the challenge around it, but thanks, Frank, for noticing it.
So I think we can move on to our next use case. The next use case we have, it's live, is with the wealth manager. And interestingly, although it's actually a wealth management relationship, as anybody would imagine, is actually very close and very contact friendly. This wealth manager definitely wanted to have an online option to onboard their clients. Actually, one of the key reasons is that the relationship managers of wealthy families, they actually want to spend a minimum time on KYC, right? And the maximum time advising their clients. And the clients is the same thing. They don't want to see their banker or their advisor to talk about KYC. It's the most boring part, it's disturbing to them. So ideally, they could potentially do this, in fact, even before seeing a client or after having a meeting, so on. So let's delve into how this actually works. So what they would do is they would send their client a link via multiple means. So it could be like via email or via basically an SMS, whatever device the client wants to use. The client clicks on it. Then the window opens, basically saying, okay, welcome, accept the terms and conditions, and please can you show us your ID? And you see that on the picture below. The person just shows the ID is pictured. A whole set of analytics is happening in the background that is actually fairly similar to what happens when you show your ID at the airport, and the first thing that happens, they put it in the machine to analyze it. That gives you a score in terms of certainty that this ID is not stolen, that it's correct, that it does micropixelization, structure analysis, all these things, right? Far more actually than you get from a simple photocopy of an idea that you could put in a file. Then we would conduct a liveness test. So this is a test that would make a picture of the person. They can again use their phone to do this, just hold it up and do it like this, or the computer. And then that picture will be compared basically to the idea. And that way, actually, it's the same person who's showing me the ID is actually the ID holder, right? It's not somebody else who stole the ID who's playing around. There is a more sophisticated version where you can ask people to move their head, and we make a 3D picture of their face so they actually know that they're not replaying a picture or faking a picture, right? And at the end of the process, again, and we didn't do this to make Guillaume happy actually, but we asked them to enter their mobile phone number so that based on this, we could get some data on them. The interesting thing is in fact, what happens, why are they using this? It's basically partly because these families, they have a few generations. And so the children suddenly all want a wealth account and want advice, and they don't want to do the old style photocopy my passport kind of, you know, they'll say, look, I'm happy to go to this wealth manager where my dad and my grandfather is and so on, but I want to do it here in front of my PS4, you know, using my tablet or my phone. I'm not going to go see these people, right? I'm going to talk to them, I'll do a video chat, and that's it, right? That was actually the primary motivation to get this next generation on board. Interestingly, in recent weeks, as you may imagine, the seniors again got very interested by this, saying, hey, can I actually somehow see you and open an account with you without physically meeting you? No offense, right? I'd like your advice, but why don't we do this all via video? And thanks to that system that's running live, it works. So it takes away a lot of redundant and boring work from the account managers, from relationship managers. It gives the compliance team a very nice picture, an analytical picture of the information that has been collected, and it makes the client's life really easier, and at the same time gives them the certainty that the ID will be properly used.
Yeah, and definitely it's in line with what we have been observing here in the US, where wealth management companies are really accelerating their digital transformation, and this is really part of it. And the KYC is really something important. Remember when we started the first KYC from one of these wealth management here in the US, we had to actually physically Photoshop to copy the contract that these companies have actually with their customers to say, look, this is the process here today. While when we go to the mobile operators and we are talking about terms and conditions, we just usually simply send a URL, you know, with a proxy link and say, hey, this is where the terms and conditions are. No, here we had to scan the document to send them and say, hey, this is what it is today. This is the document they have, and this is how they obtain the consent of their end user. So it's been very interesting to see that shift happening really quickly here in the US, but I think also in Europe and in Asia. So it's really, really interesting use case there. On that note, and because this is, you have more and more digital onboarding, and you have this account created and that are living, as we mentioned earlier, and you know, living also some of them in the darknet after breaches and so on. You want to make sure during the life cycle of your end user, you're still protecting their accounts, right? It means that it doesn't stop at the digital onboarding. It doesn't stop there. It means that it's an ongoing process. Scammers are smart. They are businessmen. When I say that, people are raising their eyebrow and they're like, what? Yes, they are businessmen. They have a return on investment. They have a business plan. And their business plan is just to make sure to be able to hack as many as possible accounts with the less effort possible. One of the attack we have seen on the rise here in the US for the last 18 months, but that start to spread all over the world, is a SIM swap attack. So basically, there is a couple of ways that the hackers gonna target one individual. Usually it's an account they know that to be either having funds on that account, usually cryptocurrency accounts, can be also payments account application that are like short loan installment, for example. And they're gonna make sure they gather any type of information around an individual, and among others, the phone number. They're gonna try to actually get access to their SIM by calling the mobile carriers, asking for the SIM, answering a few questions with all the information they gather from the darknet or through social engineering, for example, and they get a new SIM. It means that they add the SIM in a new device, and they start to get all the code and information from their victims. One of the things that we can do in that perspective is that today you want to make sure that before you send the code, the two-factor authentication, you are also able to authenticate the device. And for that, you want to make sure that device and the SIM are still attached together, and there is no change that occur within the last 24 hours. We have seen here in the US that type of attack has really been detrimental to a lot of the cryptocurrency companies, but also to payment apps. We have seen here in the US, one of our payment short loan installment app, the impact on a SIM swap attack is almost $2 million per month. $2 million per month. This is, and we are talking about a few hundreds attacks per month. So the magnitude of the number of attacks versus the amount of money that has been stolen there or that's impacted is huge, right? And the ratio is really insane. So, and this is where you have seen over the last few months, some of these title in the press, even in the more generalist press, is not only in these telecom papers that we are all excited about right now. It's even in generalist press, we have seen more and more news around that. Recently, you can see that Jack Dorsey, the Twitter CEO, has been a victim of a SIM swap attack and started to tweet some very, funky things there. But it's not here. I would say this is more marketing arms more than anything. The arms is when they touch your money, right? Your financials. And this is where we have seen this type of attack can go up to a few millions dollars, giving you a hint on this question about what the highest amount stolen through a SIM swap attack. And I still have not an answer on that one. Is the poll almost done?
I think people are trying to guess what the GDP of Belgium and Luxembourg is.
Yes, I think that's the most complicated one. But yes, wow, you all correct. This is true. I see that some people tried the GDP was GDP of Luxembourg, but yeah, no, 24 million. That's correct. So far, this is the breaking record. It's was a ring, a mobster operating out of Florida, and that attacked an AT&T customers having a cryptocurrency portfolio. It was a very known blogger around cryptocurrency. So this is where you have social engineering attack. It's very targeted. So you need to make sure that you're protecting your customer against this type of attack. So this is where we want just to also shift, and so also the use cases into life insurance. And where Frank, you and certainly
so this is a very interesting use case, life insurance, because it always sounds simple, but it's actually far more complex than it is. So you have a life insurer. Most of them, depends on country, goes through intermediaries. The digital channels are still not used that much. Maybe we'll understand that once you see how it works, because you have a policy payer, and that could be, for example, a corporation, right, that pays a policy for one of the employees. That employee is a policy holder, that life insurance policy holder. And that employee will designate, like, 2, maybe 3 beneficiaries, wife and 2 kids, something like this, right? And all these people who are involved in this policy need to be somehow KYC'd. That's an obligation, it's not an option. And at the same time, the challenge basically for life insurers is to enable their intermediaries to submit offers as fast and to materialize them as fast as they can. All right. We had a discussion with the director, sales director of life insurer that says, look, if you can build us a system that allows us to turn around and submit a firm offer in 24 hours, you're making us super competitive to others out there. Other insurers, what they're doing basically is submit an offer and the client doesn't realize that it's conditional, right? And after the analytics is done, it can take a few days. Finally, the final offer is being sent out. So it's like a pre-signature that's happening out there, right? So how does this work? So the policy payer, that can be a company. So you must, and basically they're never all physically in the room. That's the other thing, right? You will never have a representative of the company in the room at the intermediary with a policy holder and his 2 children and wife. It's never going to happen, right? I mean, everybody's other things to do. And that's where clearly going digital is going to solve a lot of issues, right? Instead of staying paper-based. So you do obviously the KYC of the corporate entity. The solution we offer there is a system where you just need to type in the name of the corporate, and the system will pull from public registers, statutes, and also the ultimate beneficial owners and the SMOs and all that stuff. So that's being digitalized. And there's two advantages for this. So it goes much faster than basically just having to collect all this. And you get it from the source, from the register. So you know nobody has tampered with the information, right? And the other onboardings, like the policyholder and beneficiaries, are done again using digital links. And because the other challenge is that the beneficiaries can change over time, right? And then it's not always easy to find people and all that stuff. So by digitalizing the whole process, basically you allow this process to be hugely accelerated. And the compliance team will look at the information in a manner that's more concise too, right? So you will come from, i.e. an insurance policy subscription and whole process taking days, if not more, sometimes it's even weeks, to actually having a firm offer, you know, I said not the real time, but 24 hours, 40 hours that you can base your decision on, which makes it also a bit more comparable to a client in a certain sense, right? When they subscribe such a policy. And the tools used for this is, as I alluded to, basically the corporate automated onboarding, document collection, the identification tools we talked about, but once again, and frequently because people are distributed, some kind of information linked to their mobile phone number. Because also the other thing we see increasingly is that these people are distributed through different countries. Let's face it, today, a lot of kids are just going to study somewhere else and all that stuff. And you don't want to wait them to come back for whatever, Christmas or whenever COVID allows them to get some papers signed.
Okay, so let's say, thanks, Frank, on that. I think we want to go also and have a future. What's the future of digital KYC? So it's where we have prepared this outlook. And one of the things we see is more and more regulation, right, around the world, and for the greater good, we say, right. But it's also brings some challenges. So we have seen GDPR recently, but we have CCPA in California. And that's driving a lot of challenges around. We have seen PIPEDA earlier a few years back in Canada. Brazil going to have their own GDPR version also, right? So in September, around September, and in Europe, you start also to have not only on privacy, but in the banking industry, you have PSD2. We are talking a lot about strong customer authentication. So this is really what's going to drive the future of digital identities. All these regulations are shaping and actually the way we're going to need to onboard our customers. And I was saying for the greater good, right? You have always people, I'm maybe seeing the half glass full, but the thing is that actually these regulation helps to develop new technologies. They help also to adapt for the end user, new technologies. And as mentioned by Frank, we have seen the onboarding has moved from a paper trail to really a few clicks, right? Starting to get to a few clicks. And this is really where that's exciting. All these compliance and all these regulation are helping to adopt new technologies and make sure that the friction that we used to have, going to a branch, actually signing the trail of paper and so on, are just disappearing. You can also have different application accessing your bank account. Of course, you have a lot of security layers over there. It's not that it's happening magically. There is a lot of things happening at the back end, right? But this is where you have companies at back end operating the magic, as I said, right? And making sure that there is a lot of layers of compliances and security enforced there. So yes, I think definitely the future will be geared towards a lot of best practice and compliance, but that's going to bring new technology on board and accelerate the growth there. Do you have Frank? And that's one. Oh yes, I forgot that question. Was almost one of my favorite, right? When is PSD2 theoretically entering in force, right? It's been we've been all waiting for a long time about PSD2. So we'll see what's happening. It's been again delayed recent with the recent events that we know. So we'll see where it's going. Do you have some
the game
bets?
changer?
You want to bet on it, Frank?
Who's going to answer what? I don't know. What if you don't have a sister-in-law?
That's yeah. Okay. Okay. So rumors say by end of summer 2020. Yes, indeed. We'll see if it's happening at that time. But it's been, as we mentioned, it's been postponed a couple of times. But there is no doubt that at one point it's going to be enforced. And what we want to do is just to make sure that everybody is ready when PSD2 is coming into action, right? And this is where it's important to have best practice in place and having the tools that also respect these compliance best practice.
So I think there's a game changer. It's really heavily driven by clients. So on one hand, clients are using a platform approach for financial services. So in the past, basically, you would create a bank account with a bank, and that bank would own you for the coming years as a client, and you would bank mostly through that bank, right? Now that's really changed. Usually you have more than one bank. You consume certain banking services through platforms, like, for example, savings schemes. You would go on a platform and say, oh, that looks good. And the challenge with this is people need immediate onboarding. That means I may choose a savings scheme actually before I choose the bank that provides that solution. And based on whatever it offers me, that means as a consumer, they will usually, as a bank, give you only a few minutes to onboard yourself. If it takes too long, they jump. They just jump. They're gone. They go somewhere else. You know, oh, this looked like a cool savings skill. I wanted to have that bank, but you know what? It's been 7 minutes. Something didn't work. Was complicated. I'm out of here. I don't want to use that bank. I'll go back to the other bank that seems to have a cooler solution. So they're really basically consumers who want immediate gratification, right? No time to wait. It needs to be intuitive. That's also super important. There is not much thinking to be involved in that. And then it's going to be available anywhere, anytime. That's the other thing, right? I'm not going to wait to go into a bank. And it's going to, I mean, let me tell you, I recently had a person I knew, they went to a bank branch and they were told that they were in the wrong bank branch based on their address. They should go to a different bank branch. Now, just imagine going to a Levi's store and you were told, no, you cannot buy jeans here. You need to go to another Levi's store. It's just unthinkable, right? So the consumer expectations actually totally high out there in terms of what financial services will provide them. And then there's another split basically in terms of, well, I want to have more than one bank. I want to be able to jump from one to the other, but there are certain things actually I don't want to do myself anymore, right? So they will not close and open a bank account because they changed provider. They'll keep all these bank accounts. That's where PSD2 comes back. They will delegate to a bank the fact that they can aggregate the accounts and, okay, pull my savings from these 4 accounts and make some kind of scheme for me and all that stuff. So basically, the client are willing to delegate access to their account. And that makes identity even the more important because you come to a world where actually it's not only you using ID, but actually you're delegating the use to ID of the people. And that's where trust and safety are increasingly important.
Yes, and this is where we are always coming back to that balance, right, between friction and security and easiness of using these tools and these applications. And I think you had a very interesting, we discussed that, I think back in the days, and you mentioned a couple of interesting facts about how many click like a customer need today just to create an online account, which means that we need to improve that part also, right?
Yes, I think, is that one of our questionnaires we got out there? Is that the next question popped up? So the question is, I think, so how many clicks, you know, how, or what, I mean, we looked at the European market, mostly the UK, I think, and there was a range of clicks between the most efficient accounts and the least efficient accounts just to open them, right? And we'll talk about the future later. And the range was between 20 and
250, 200?
Exactly, over 100 clicks to open an account. So if I was a bank who requires their clients to do over 100 clicks to open a bank account, I would go into very, very deep thinking, right? Because remember one thing, every click is a potential source of mistake, right? Yeah.
And also someone dropping out of the account, right? So
every delay is dropping, yeah.
Yes.
And something can go wrong and they drop again, yeah.
So one of the other outlook I really like and mentioned here is the self-sovereign and continuous identity. And this is where I think, Frank, you want just to add a couple of things. And
so I think the next step of identity is self-sovereign. So there's still obviously going to be governments, people issuing some kind of ID, but then what increasingly people want to do, and their systems being set up, and we have one that's shown here, is basically a system where you can take a certificate of that ID, and you as an individual can then decide with whom you share it, how you share it, and all that stuff. Also, when the how is important, because actually sometimes you don't want to share the whole ID. If you want to go, into a nightclub, for example, and all they need to know is you passed 18 or 21, that's it. Why should they know your full name, your address, and when you're born in detail, right? It's none of their business. And through these schemes of self-sovereign identity, you can actually basically do this, split your identity, and give people only access to the bit they need to fulfill the service you want from them. That's it, right? If you want to go online, do online shopping and say, I want to actually buy a bottle of champagne online, they will say, oh, we're happy to deliver it, but prove to me you're 18. Well, they need to know you're 18 plus, not that you're like 50 plus, for example, right? Or whatever, things like that. And this is mostly, this again calls for very, very secure ID mechanisms out there, which means at any time they could, and that comes back to 2FA, send you a little message saying, hey, verify this is really you. So I have to, two sources of truth regarding yourself. And the other challenge is obviously with this self-sovereign ID is that actually people trust this because they can trace who uses their ID. And then begets calls for other systems where they can clearly see, okay, that and that person has used it, and that way I'm safe. So that's one big new block that's coming to us. And you need technology to enable this because people will only use this if it's trusted, really shareable and traceable, right?
And
And
this
the
is
most
where
common self-onboarding device, again, I'm sorry to say, here it is.
Exactly. I was going to that direction. Yeah. And this is where it's important. Again, the mobile and the smartphone takes a really central piece in that. And you want to make sure you keep the authentication and being really agile there, right? And this is where this is for us, I think, overall, this is the future. This is where we want to go. But this is also a lot of big opportunities, but a lot of threat, because you need, if it's a continuous identity, it means it's a continuous threat, because scammers and hackers can try to take advantage of it. So this is really where we want to make sure that there was different level of security and layers of verification and authentication. But again, we want to keep this fine equilibrium between security and friction. So this is where that's going to be a very interesting topic, hopefully sooner than later to work on and having our hands on.
There is another aspect I wanted to touch on was continuous ID, because actually what we could call behavioral ID. So you have a certain way to behave online, right? You online shopping, your preferences and all this, and by tracking that, and it's one of the most difficult things to imitate is your behavior in a certain sense for a third party. So the notion of continuous ID is going to be that systems are going to monitor what you do in an ongoing manner. And once you come back to a given space and you have a certain digital behavior, it will match it and see, oh, wait a minute, but that's totally different, right? The way they click, the way they interact and all that stuff. The way they voice, because I think we're going to go a lot from clicking to speaking, which opens a total other universe for the future, because that may mean we'll have ongoing and continuous voice analytics while we're interacting with the machine. My perception of clicking is going to be something that my grandchildren, they're going to see this in like old movies, this clicking thing we do all day, right? That's going to be, they're going to talk to machines. That's coming to the next level clearly. But this again begets always something that validates your identity. So we're going to become more continuous, but it may be also requesting more continuous little test messages, or at a certain client point and say, hey, is this you do, or whatever, or by the way, hey, you usually like blue flowers, not today, and then you see the reaction and it's probably that same person, they just have change something in their life.
Yes.
So the good thing is what we talked about in the first part of this webinar is what we're doing now, but there's a huge gap in terms of efficiency we can build. And what we're talking about now is actually already the next gap we need to fill. And we know we'll have to fill it because it's coming right now. But the current gap in terms of digitalizing the ID processes and meaning the online processes of users is huge. You can gain huge time in terms of user, satisfaction and experience, but also add a huge layer of security, Guillaume, right? So convenience, yes, but at the same time, security, right?
Yes, security will going to be, again, this balance between friction and convenience, security, convenience. That's really everything that differentiate also a brand from another, an app from another. And this is, you mentioned clearly, this is where I want to shift from my current bank to another because it's too cumbersome to deal with that bank. So we have seen a lot of changes over time, and sometimes to the detriment of security. So no, you need to reclaim that security part. Especially, I'm saying here strongly about the U.S. here, where we have seen that a lot of bank accounts have been recently hacked and so on, and this is where you want to make sure that you keep that balance really well maintained. I see that we already on the Q&A time. We are on the clock here, and just make sure to drag the attention there. I already see that we have questions. I propose we go to the Q&A right now. And I see a first question. So I guess can you see it?
I can.
Okay, I'm going to read it. Hi, any plan for mobile operators in the US to launch an identity app like It's Me in Belgium? Thanks. So definitely there is few initiatives. First, for the one who do not know what It's Me is an initiative to actually link. It's an application that links your mobile phone and your bank account in Belgium, and you can onboard easily thanks to It's Me. There, I try to summarize it and condensate everything as short as possible, but that's the spirit behind It's Me. It's been a huge success. It's been driven by the mobile operators. The bank have really also followed that path. So it's a really great solution in place there in Belgium, having a lot of traction. We have, or we call it our mother company. Yes, Proximus has been part of the initiative. Proximus has been always really leading in terms of mobile identity. We've been working with them. It's been really a real pleasure to work with them because they're really at the forefront of mobile identity from that part. But in the US, there is some initiative from some mobile operators in the US have been very early in providing inside information for security perspective to banks first, also to FinTech, to e-commerce platform for the onboarding and for the account protection. But they never had, they never had really an app like It's Me, right? That is just something that belonged to the carriers. However, they released end of last year. They released an app, and I can provide the name later on. I totally forgot the name of that app. It tells you a lot about the success of that app, where they want to centralize everything, all your identity, your digital and mobile identity, in one application, and the success there is really mitigated, even very low. I'm not sure, that's a funny thing. We know that the mobile operators have a very, especially in the US and in Europe, they have a lot of good insight on the user, right? But if you only launch that application by saying, hey, I'm the mobile operators, and dear user, you use me for all your identification with all these applications, it's not going to work. You need to create a demand. You need to create to engage all the actors. Like in Belgium, it happened with It's Me, right? It's not just the mobile operators driving that initiative. It's coming also from the banking industry. And when they both work together, it makes miracle. But if they work each of them on the side, it doesn't work. It will not fly, just simply because the user not going to adopt one application from the mobile operators or from the bank and then go to another application for another identification and so on. So it needs to be really, you need a massive adoption from the start by getting all the actors all together. So yeah, and I will try to find again the name of that app that they launched recently. I apologize. Again, still around almost 6 a.m. So I have no more excuse here. Any other question here? I think we had a question earlier, I mean, from some colleagues, and that would be a good one, about efficiency, right? And how digital KYC can increase productivity. I think, Frank, that's something you want to address?
Yeah, actually, it's an interesting question that we often get, right? Why do you do this? And the management of digital identity in context of KYC and client interaction has a few steps, as we talked about, and one step that really takes around 60+% of the time resources, actually the collection of information. And it is actually the most boring and part of all this, right? So what the digital processes can do is they can hugely accelerate the collection of all this information and actually get it from being manual to automatic. So, we did some studies and we clearly can easily say that by digitalizing these processes, you can save 50% of the time and the costs involved into the onboarding process of a client, whether it's a client who's going to do e-commerce with you or in the rental hotel business and things like this. It's a huge time and cost saver. So it's a pretty, from a decision point of view, as long as you're designing it correctly so that it stays and is really intuitively convenient to clients, the decision to do this is actually fairly, the return on investment is really very, very near, right? The impact is very significant.
We have a couple of other questions you're going to take here. I have one from Patrick. Thanks. So do you see the authentication by SMS a long-term solution, or it will be replaced by other communication channel powered by OTTs? So very excellent question. So this is where we have started to see the emergence of over-the-top channels like WhatsApp for business, WeChat, Facebook Messenger, that are used today to also communicate to the customers. So what is the beauty of SMS? SMS works on any type of phone. SMS, it's feature phone, smartphone, any new phone, right? So yes, we love SMS for that because it's ubiquitous. However, it's true that people like to be engaged also on their favorite apps. What we see today with OTTs is that they are not necessarily used for authentication. They're more used for communication via contact center. So contact center are going to use this channel to communicate with their customers. It's going to be a two-way exchange. But we have not seen yet the adoption for authentication, just receiving a password. This is not happening today. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. I think it's going to be one of the channel of communication that a user will want in the future and want to adopt. So today we have SMS and voice, right? Our SMS is going to shift towards RCS. It's like RCS is like PSD2, right? We talk about it for a long time, but we still don't see when the adoption going to be massively there. But still, it's going to be there. So, and you're going to have OTTs channel like WeChat, Facebook, and so on. So this is where you want to make sure you offer a large array of potential authentication to your customers, right? And you don't are just stuck into one type of authentication from that perspective. So yes, in the future, it's certainly possible that we also use this omni-channel approach from that perspective. Hopefully it answers your questions. We have two other questions. One is from Vitaly. What exactly are the product and services of TeleSign Telendus for the digital ID area? I think Frank and I could talk for hours on that, but I propose maybe, Vitaly, we can contact you offline by providing you additional answer on that.
I think in a nutshell, we have a solution that englobes a whole series of modules that range from mobile intel, two-factor, to ID piece capture and verification, behavioral analytics, and they're combined together according to your need and your business model. And as Guillaume said, we'll come back to you in detail what this means. Yeah.
So Ian McCallum, how important is regulation in accelerating the identity and authentication ecosystem? Surely it's not just about technology. Best, Ian.
Huge, huge. It's become so much more expensive to go wrong on this, right? From first, you get fined very fast. Number two, the cost to reputation are just huge. And regulation has actually recently been embracing digital client interaction, right? The Swiss bank regulator, for example, has been very early on at the peak saying we accept video onboarding, we accept digital onboarding, we're in favor of it. And there's one of the regulators, even European regulators, openly said that actually digital onboarding in their mind is more qualitative than physical onboarding. So the regulators are clearly giving this a huge push. Just to let you know, we are showing them our solutions every 3 months or so. So they're very interested in seeing what's out there because they see this as the future, right? And the other thing is partly, and I alluded to that, to have an ID piece that's digitally analyzed gives you far more certainty in terms of ID than having a photocopy lying around that the person who, no offense, but uses photocopy probably doesn't know how to analyze, right? So I think it's a huge push and pull at the same time.
Yeah, we want also definitely, and we have seen that in the local market, that it's important regulation there. It's also about privacy, right? And data privacy is extremely important. And as you mentioned, rightly, and it's not only about technology, but privacy these days, it's everything, right? I recently saw one of these, I don't know if you're familiar all with this advertising type of Oscars. And one of the winner this year in Cannes, it's named the Lions in Cannes. And one of the winner is about the digital footprint of a kid versus his parents, right? And you see that massive footprint of the kid, which is, I think, a footprint, which is huge. And this is the kid name, his age, and then you have his parents with the small footprint. And this is where data privacy becomes really extremely important. So indeed, it's not only about technology, it's just to make sure that we also reclaim what we own, all data, we own them, right? And we want just to make sure that when having this identity authentication and when we are building this ecosystem, we are not only thinking about the technology, but we are thinking about the user behind and how they're going to use that online. And we need to make sure that from that perspective, we are mindful of that part of the business, because it's not one piece technology, it's not one piece data privacy, it's everything goes together. And we need to make sure we are mindful of that when providing this solution, working all together with working groups, with the mobile operators, with the data providers, and so on. All together, we are working and make sure that, again, we provide the most frictionless solution, but respecting all these dimensions in terms of technology and data privacy. And I think we just reached, I have a last question here, maybe, yes, from Jeremy. In your opinion, how will the use of location data evolve in the near future, post-COVID? I don't know, Frank, if I got a couple of hints on that. I can maybe share an experience we had here. So in the US, location was used by the carriers, and the carriers were providing that to a couple of brokers here in the US. However, I think 18 months ago, there was a huge scandal because actually a company was taking and building some kind of tracker for its bounty hunters, So, you know, we still have that concept coming from the wild, wild west here in the US, which is bounty hunters, right? Someone who was not going back to jail after just a temporary, you know, is free for a temporary period, doesn't go back to jail, and you have the bounty hunter just doing the job of the police, right? Kind of. And this is where actually we have seen these guys, these bounty hunters, using the location of the inmates to track them and arrest them. And there was a huge scandal. So after that, the mobile operators here in the US had to stop because they were providing this type of information really with a free pass, right? And we were talking about data privacy. There was no data privacy. And there was a huge debate around where an inmate data privacy limits are and so on. I don't want to enter there. But that triggered that. And it triggered also the fact that they stopped to resell that service on the market. However, with COVID, we have seen that location has been extremely useful, mapping the disease and mapping how it happens. To also, we see some initiative like in Korea, in France, in all over the globe, right? About tracking, this tracking tools. And I think this is very interesting to see how people are going to be embracing that in the future. If there is some specific use case where they will accept to give their location, right? We see during a pandemic, it's not a given fact that they accept to give their location data, which is very strange to me because most of the app, like the weather app, the search engine apps are already having access to your location and using them. And I say my location too, but all location for a very long time, right? It's just it was at the back end. So yeah, we'll see where people mindset going to go. I really believe into macro location, right? Doing versus micro. And this is to help, but in the security, we need to see how we can help, how it can help to design new models in terms of.
I think the how is the key word in a certain sense. So it's going to happen, and what is important is actually that the people have the impression that they control it, right? I.e., I can activate it. I can decide when my data will be deleted. I can decide, or I can see who can see it. So their technology needs to get a bit better on creating transparency. Actually, who's seeing my data? Where is it stored, and all that stuff. And there will be means developed so that I will actually be able to see who uses my data as much as people see my data. And then people could opt in for COVID is an evident reason, but actually you could go into a shopping mall and they say, look, you get a voucher of, I don't know, $10 if you're willing to share your location data while you're in the shopping mall. If people trust that the data is really going to be deleted afterwards and used to no bad avail, and they may do it. They may do it. I said they're using it for weather and other kind of locations, X maps. If I want to know what's around me in terms of sightseeing, all that stuff, the how will be really important. And if the how is enabled in a manner that basically people trust that they are in control of what's happening with their data, so including location data, and then it benefits either them or society, then the use is probably going to be increasing also in environments that are not coercive, right? That's what's important to add.
Great. Okay, I think we are no more question, but definitely really enjoy spending this time with you. Thanks for all the good questions here. Christina, we leave you the final word.
Yeah, thank you both for speaking on this topic. I can see based on the polls that people were really engaged and that they really liked the session. So thank you everyone for joining, and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye all.
Bye.
Have a good one.